Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So, let's see what cards are going to be, well, high in demand, high in price, and highly scary, highly obnoxious potentially. There's a lot of crazy cards from Murders at Karlov Manor, and some of them are now demanding a crazy price tag even before the set comes out. So with all that said, let's jump into those cards. So, first up, and potentially unsurprisingly, if you've been paying attention to the spoiler season, at the top of the list is Ansrag the Quake Mole. Now, I will say that when it comes to these prices, I am taking, according to Moxfield, which is pulling prices from Scryfall, the lowest price, essentially, for a card. So if there's other versions of it and they're more expensive, it's not including those. Got it? So Ansrag the Quake Mole, apparently the regular version is the least expensive, an 8/4 Mole God for 4 mana. When it becomes blocked, untap each creature control. After this combat phase, there's a combat phase. Pay 3, red, red, green, green. Has to be blocked every single combat. Yeah, I've covered this in a couple of episodes at this point, but this card is absurd. I'm sure that, I don't really know other formats all that well, but yeah, like in Standard, that seems like it would be pretty absurd too. That being said, in Commander, as the Commander, this is just like, oh yeah, I combo incredibly easily with like a simple fog or some indestructible spells. It's very easy for you to go infinite and win with this with infinite combats, and yes, that is so very powerful. It's also just very powerful like in an extra combat deck too, of course. So yeah, this card for many, many, many reasons, again, it's also a mythic, is very, very expensive so far. Again, $26.51. We'll see where that price actually lands here in a couple of days, but still. Early indications say this one's going to be toward the top, if not at the top. Moving on, Tomic, the Wielder of the Law. This one actually surprised me. A 2/4 Human Advisor for 3 mana in total. An Orazam, affinity for Planeswalkers, Flying Vigilance. Whenever opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you or Planeswalkers you control, that opponent loses 3 life and you draw a card. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be all that surprised because, yeah, Planeswalker, Tribal decks, Super Friends decks are pretty popular out there, and this can be very good for them, obviously. This one can obviously be the Commander, or it can be the 99 of it. It's a good deterrent from your opponents attacking you, or this is a value for when they do, when they attack you or your Planeswalkers. So yeah, again, another mythic quite up there in price at $24.65. Then we've got Dely, Streetwise Lookout. This one, again, is yet another mythic. Apparently, this version is the cheapest version. A 2/2 Human Scout for 2 and a white. Creature control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures power 3 or greater. If an ability of a creature control with power 2 or less triggers additional time. Basically, small creatures are unblockable to big creatures, at least yours are. And also, hey, if you've got small creatures, their triggers double up. These kind of doubling trigger type commanders and cards in the 99 have become quite popular, and Wizards keeps making them, which is a different discussion for a different day. But yes, this kind of effect is like, oh yeah, I've got a deck that already has just a bunch of low-to-the-ground creatures that have some really good triggers, so let's throw this in there, let's double those up. Or of course, as the Commander itself can be like, yeah, that's quite a good effect to build around. Next up, Masker Girl Known Killer. Yeah, this one. Here we go. $18.59, good enough for 4th place. 4/4 Human Assassin. Oh, there you go, 4. For 4 mana, lots of 4s everywhere. Menace, creature control have Wither. Whenever creature opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. This can, of course, fit into decks like, Hepatra, ones that work with -1/-1 counters, and of course, ones that utilize that kind of effect with maybe proliferate effects as well to really take advantage of that and ensure that you can take your opponent's creatures out in that way. Of course, this plus like a Toxic Deluge also is going to take creatures down to toughness 0, making it so that you draw an absurd amount of cards. The amount of card advantage on this can just be absurd for the correct deck, and obviously, yeah, this is a pretty popular creature in Magic, pretty popular character, I should say, whenever Ravnica comes rolling around. And yeah, building around the 99 of this one, or building around, sorry, as a commander of this one, can be quite problematic for your opponents. Moving on. Alquist Prof, Master Sluth, yet another mythic that is up there in price. A 3/3 Vigilant Human Detective for 3 mana, and Azorius, I almost said Orzhov there, enters the battlefield, investigate, pay basically Sphinx's Revelation colors, and cost, tap, sacrifice a clue, Sphinx's Revelation, gain X, draw X. So a repeatable Sphinx's Revelation is massive. This can be, I'm not going to say problematic, but potentially problematic for your opponents if you are set up properly, if you build your deck around this and say, hey, you know what? I've got ways to generate clues. In fact, there's plenty of ways to be like, hey, if you cast an instant sorcery, Trail Mystery, I think is the one, right? Make a clue. That's the way. And so by doing that, you can be like, oh, okay, cool. I cast a Dramatic Reversal. I untap my commander. And with that, all my non-land permanents, which includes my mana rocks, my creature, dorks, whatever they are, essentially, utilize more mana to do it again. Draw even more cards, do it again and again and again. Of course, so this in the 99 of a clue deck is very, very good. And of course, this commander can be very, very deadly. Next up, Expedited Inheritance down to $15.73. Still quite up there for a player like me who plays on a budget. Enchantment for red. Whenever a creature is dealt damage, the controller may exile that many cards to the top of their library. They may play those cards until the end of their next turn. It is a may. So again, your opponents, if you cast a Blasphemous Act, aren't like, oh no, I'm milled. I mean, they're like, okay, I can choose to get like 13, 26, 39, whatever, variables of 13 essentially to, exile and get, off the top of my library. So this is a very interesting card. It's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out. It's definitely not for every kind of a deck out there, but this one has a lot of potential. It is a symmetrical effect, so you're not the one that's getting all the advantage out of it, but your opponents might not take as much advantage out of it. So it's a very interesting one. We shall see. Next up, Intrude on the Mind, $14.82. I'm actually surprised to see this one up there. It is a mythic, yes. But when it comes to how good this one is compared to like a Fact or Fiction, that extra mana I do think makes a difference. But so far, players out there are like, you know what? Well, let's check it out. Instant for 5 mana. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library, separate them into 2 piles. Opponent chooses one of them, put that one in your hand, the other into your graveyard. So basically, again, Fact or Fiction right there. But on top of that, create a 0/0 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. Get a counter on it for each card, put in your graveyard this way. So yeah, the potential to essentially say for that 1 extra mana on top of that Fact or Fiction, I am making a Thopter that could be anywhere between technically a 0/0 and it goes away. I guess it starts off as 0/0, but it gets no counters. It would just go away, or it could be 5 power if you really need it in that way, if your opponent's willing to do the other. It just depends on what you are willing to do when it comes to maybe making a deal with your opponent, maybe just kind of taking whatever the best pile is, or depends on, how big you want that Thopter to be. Interesting. Aurelius Vindicator is next up at $14.01. 4/2 Angel with Flying, Lifelink, and Ward 2. For 4 mana, this one has Disguise for X3 and a white. Whenever it's turn face up, exile up to X other target creatures from the battlefield and our cards in graveyards. When it leaves the battlefield, return the exile cards to owner's hands. This one is reminiscent of an older angel back in the day whose names escaped me, who was like 7 mana ETB to boost to 3 things. So this is kind of like a potential removal-ish spell, like temporary removal, or recursion, or a combination of both depending on what you want. Regardless, I mean, Flying, Lifelink, Ward 2 for a 4/2, for 4 is really good anyways. So Angel Tribal decks will love this, as well as, of course, I'm sure in Standard it's going to be a pretty good card as well. Speaking of which, Incinerate the Guilty, my goodness, not Angel Tribal, but Dragon Tribal. 6/6 Dragon with Flample for 6 mana. Deals combination to a player. You may collect Evidence X. When you do, it deals X damage to each creature and each planeswalker that player controls, meaning that this is a repeatable board wipe on a body that can pretty easily get through on at least one opponent every single time you want to. And all of a sudden, again, you're utilizing, again, if you're using Dragon Tribal, you probably have other big dragons in your graveyard. They're like, oh yeah, cool. I'll collect Evidence 8 and then wipe your board. Goodbye. Yeah, it doesn't have to just be Dragon Tribal. It can be other types of decks as well. But yeah, quite a spicy good card. Then we've got Vannifar Evolved Enigma, $12.35. You can kind of see where all these mythics are stacking up right now. Obviously, the supply is going to be lower. Prices are going to be higher typically, but we are seeing where they stack up in comparison to each other. A 3/4 Elf Ooze Wizard. That costs 4 mana. And Simic being a comment on your turn, cloak a card from your hand, put a counter on each color's creature you control. This is a card that you can really use and abuse that effect, especially as the commander building around this. You're like, okay, I cloak this card. I cast an Essence Flux to blanket. It goes away, it comes back, and all of a sudden, it is an Omniscience. You can cheat into play massive cards quite quickly, quite easily. Blightsteel Colossus, whatever, Eldrazi, whatever you want to do, you can cheat it in quite easily. And then again, with those blue blink spells, blanket to flip it. So yeah, I'm not surprised to see this one up there. And it's a very interesting, spicy Simic commander. Next up, also not surprised to see Vin Ripper up there, a 6/5 Vampire Assassin with flying that costs 6 mana in total. Ward, sacrifice a creature. Whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Yeah, this is gonna be a crazy card once it hits the battlefield with a Aristocrat style strategy. Basically like a double Blood Artist type effect that is hard to deal with because again, your opponent has to sacrifice a creature to actually try to get rid of it when they actually try to target it, which can be a very bad proposition for them because, again, they're doing that. They're going to be losing life off of that, or you can choose someone else too. And also, you probably have some ways, like, Sure. Okay, this dies. I'll feign death this, so it comes back into play. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Yeah, this is a very, very good card. Again, aristocrat style decks, vampire decks, assassin decks. Lots of decks out there can use this. This very, very cool card. Not only specific kinds of decks, only coolest kinds of decks, though, can utilize Leyline of the Guild Pack. Those are 5-color decks out there. I, of course, am a 5-color fan. Guilty as charged. Enchantment for, well, a really weird mana combination. Green or white, green or blue, black or green, red or green. Never thought I'd see those mana symbols on one card. Regardless, if it's in your opening hand, like other Leylines, begin the game with it in play. Each non-land permanent you control is all colors. More importantly, though, lands you control are every basic land type to show their types. Basically, I mean, like Chromatic Lantern, essentially. Is that the one? Whatever that one lantern is that's like, hey, your lands can tap for any color. Nearly the exact same thing, but even more impactful because, hey, turn 0, you get this down. Doesn't actually tap for mana, though, but enchantments are hard to deal with in artifacts. Regardless, a very, 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 very good card for basically, hey, are you playing 5-color and you have $10 currently lying around? Yeah, a very good card. And again, our first, I was going to say non-mythic. Yeah, our first rare essentially to pop up on this list. So we're seeing where, again, these rares and mythics are really playing out. Next up, Rakdos, Patron of Chaos, a 6/6 demon for 6 mana flample. Beginning of your end step, target opponent may sacrifice 2 non-land, non-token permanents. If they don't, draw 2 cards. This can be, I mean, depending on the build, decently oppressive, but also like, yeah, if you're playing a demon tribal build around it, yeah, it could be quite fun, or just throw 99 of a demon deck, and demon has definitely got more popular over time. Also, Sphinxes too. Eddie's Sphinx deck is gross. Make sure you take Eddie out first if you're playing Unesh. A 6/6 Sphinx Detective with flying for 7 mana in total. You may collect evidence 10 rather than pay the mana cost for spells you cast. So this one could obviously go in a Sphinx tribal build, but also, yeah, just, hey, absurd things that you can do with this. This can actually, obviously, when you're casting those things basically for free out of your hand, you can lead to more spells being in your graveyard. That can also lead to more evidence, lead to casting even more things. Being able to cheat on mana is always a potentially problematic and very powerful thing. But also with this, yeah, you can do some really spicy things with it. I can see entire decks being built around this one. It's just a very spicy effect. Next up, we've got Undergrowth Recon, yet another mythic for $9.90 currently. Enchantment for 3 mana. Beginning of your upkeep, return target land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. Being able to get lands out of your graveyard as just like a resource. There are certain decks that are always going to have lands in the graveyard, essentially like a Gitrog monster deck, where it's like, oh yeah, I sacrifice lands all the time. Keep getting lands out. Also, if you hit, well, regular fetch lands, they do come into play tap with this, so that isn't going to be as quick as you might want it to be. That being said, if you have like the new Capenna fetches, which like on ETB get sacrificed and then go fetch a land, that is just a free extra land every single turn as long as you have the basics in your library to get with this. So yeah, with certain lands, this can be incredibly deadly, with just a landfall deck, essentially a deck that get lands in the graveyard. This can just be, hey, you get a free extra land every single turn and just ramp into oblivion. Next up, Kaa Spirits Justice, the Planeswalker from this set. 3-star loyalty Kaa for 4 mana in Orzhov. Whenever one or more creatures you control and/or creature cards in graveyards are put in exile, you may choose a creature card from among them. Till end of turn, target token control becomes a copy except as flying. So turn one of your tokens into something incredibly deadly. +2, surveil 2, exile card from your graveyard. +1, make a 1/1 spirit. -2, exile creature control. For each other player, exile up to 1 target creature that player controls. So that can be a good way to remove some things on the board. And also, yeah, give yourself some options. Moving on, Argus Kaa Spirit of Justice playing into, well, that's Suspect. 2/4 Spirit Detective for 4 mana and Boros. Double strike Vigilance. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to 1 target creature suspected. Exile otherwise suspected. So again, if you're playing around with Suspect, you can start getting rid of some things. Next up, Atrata Deadly Fugitive. Yet another mythic up there. And again, this is apparently the least expensive version of it with this alternative art. A 1/4 Vampire Assassin for 3 mana in Dimir. Death Touch. Face down creatures you control have pay 2 in Dimir colors. Turn this creature face up. If you can't, exile, you may pass the card that pays its mana cost. Whenever Assassin control deals combination to opponent, cloak the top card of that player's library. So this one can be like Assassin Tribal, or you could also build it kind of like that Vanifar, where you're like, hey, let's just flip things up essentially for a lot cheaper than we'd be able to do it. Next up, Wojek Investigator. Again, yet another yet another rare non-mythic. There we go. A 2/4 Angel Detective, flying Vigilance for 3 mana. Beginning of your upkeep, investigate once for each opponent who has more cards in hand than you. Mono white, traditionally, it's gotten better recently. Traditionally, though, has struggled with card advantage. This is a card that's like, hey, do you want all the card advantage at a cost? Because again, if your opponents have more cards in hand than you, if each one of them does, again, in Commander, you got 3 opponents, they probably, if you're playing mono white, you're going to be the lowest when it comes to the amount of cards in your hand. So now, cool, make 3 clues at the beginning of your end step, beginning of your upkeep, I should say, sorry, and being able to pay 2 to sacrifice those, draw a card, or utilize them in different ways as well. So yeah, if you have an artifact-based deck, maybe a token-based deck, or again, if you're just playing mono white, you need more cards, this is a good card for you. Next up, if you're playing mono green, or I guess 2 colors, 3, you might be pushing it a little bit because this is a very specific casting cost. Green, 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 instant, choose 1, go get a creature or land from your library, put on the battlefield, tapped if it's a land, otherwise put in your hand, then shuffle. So, hey, go get any land out of your library. Again, it doesn't say basic, for 3 mana, go get that Gaia's Cradle, put it into play, tapped. Gross. Or hey, go get that creature for 3 mana. Also gross. Oh, we're not done yet. Get a counter target creature you control, deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control, or exile target artifact or enchantment. So either way, those are removal essentially. Yes, a very flexible card that can help you out in so many situations. A very, very, very good and very good card. $8.87 currently. Moving on. Nib Mizzet, the Guild Pact. $8.72 currently for this 5-color. Love it. Rare Dragon Avatar. A 6/6 with Flying Hexproof for multicolored. Whenever it deals combat to a player, it deals X damage to any target. Target player draws X cards. You gain X life for X the different number of pairs among permanents you control that are exactly 2 colors. Basically, how many guilds do you have in play? Cool, you get that much absurd value. So this one, I would say, is a card that, yeah, you could see in the 99, of course, if you already have decks that are built around, like, a lot of guilds. It's pretty good already, but, yeah, if you build a deck around this, you can do some pretty crazy things with it, get a lot of value out of it. Double strike, extra combats, all those things can, of course, help out with this. Next up, Drasani 3 Whispers. Now we're starting to get down there with some mythics that aren't quite as expensive. A 4/4, I mean, compared to the other ones, a 4/4 for 3 mana in Selesnya. Pay 1 in a green, give a creature Death Touch. Pay Selesnya, target creature gains Vigilance on a turn. Pay 2 in a white, give a creature Double Strike. Again, this is not specified. Does not specify just your creatures. Could be your opponent's creatures, so it just depends on if you want to build this politics. If you want to build this in a way where you're just building Voltron. If you want to build this in a way where we've got a lot of different creatures coming through and they don't know what you're going to benefit. So yeah, it could be interesting in those ways. Next up, not surprised to see this one up there again. Yet another rare that's making it up there in price. Case of the Stash Skeleton. When this ETBs, make a 2/1 skeleton with suspected, that is suspected. To solve, you have no suspected skeletons. Pay 1 a black, sacrifice, go get a card, put in your hand, then shuffle. Activate on sorcery. So essentially, this is kind of like a either delayed demonic tutor or like a diabolic tutor that you have to work towards, because this is going to be 4 mana in total again to actually get that tutor portion, but you are getting a 2/1 that has menace and can't block. And of course, if you're utilizing this, say, in a aristocrat style strategy, you can just ensure that this gets taken out when you need to. You can like sacrifice it with one of your many effects to do so. Or yeah, if you're counting on actually swinging, you know, having an opponent maybe block, then that can happen too. But yes, again, kind of like a weird tutor effect, but one that can be very effective. And again, one that once you are set up, then you only have to pay 2 mana to actually go tutor. So it is kind of like a demonic tutor in that way. Next up, Reenact the Crime, yet another rare making it up there, a very interesting card. 1 blue, 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 instant, exile target non-land card in a graveyard that's with it from anywhere this turn, copy it, cast the copy out, paying its mana cost. So if you play a mill strategy, yeah, you can just for 4 mana get the best thing that you just milled essentially, or if someone board wipes, there's different scenarios we can utilize this again. It can be your own graveyard, it doesn't have to be an opponent's, so make sure you're keeping that in mind as well. A very interesting card. Next up, the Pride of the Hulklade, a mythic that is very inspiring, at least to me. A 2/5 Crocodile Elk Turtle for 11 mana in total in green. It's going to cost X less to cast, though, or X the total toughness creature you control. Defender, pay 2 blue, blue until end of turn. Give a creature +1/+0, and whenever it deals combat to a player, draw cards equal to its toughness. You can attack as though it didn't have Defender. So this is a potentially new, exciting commander that is like, hey, you know what? You want to draw 15 cards? Congratulations. Let's do that again and again and again, maybe even more again, because you can actually stack that effect. But also, if you already have a Defender tribal deck, this is a shoo-in for that deck. An incredible, incredible card. Next up, some of the players, an interesting card, and we will see how this one plays out, really. Enchantment for 1 and a white. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. Once each turn, you may cast a creature spell power 2 less to the top of your library. Wizard is kind of dipping its toe into an area it really hasn't been when it comes to mono white, giving them the ability to really cast things off the top of your library. Very specific though. Green gets like, hey, any creature at the top of your library, right? Mono white gets, no, just small creatures. So if you do have a deck that has a lot of small creatures, yes, give you a lot of value. If not, yeah, you're going to ignore this one. So it's going to be interesting to see really how this one plays out and what kinds of decks out there end up using it. Speaking of which, Case of the Locked, Hot House, ironically, right around that same price. 4 mana in total, play additional land each of your turns. 2 solve, you control 7 more lands. That's going to take no time at all, of course. Solve, you make the top card of your library. Anytime you may play lands, cast creatures, and enchantment spells from the top of your library. So again, like I mentioned, yeah, mono white only gets, you know, the small creatures. All right, it does take a little bit to build into this, but not really at all, and it costs a little more, sure. But yeah, you get creatures, you get lands, and you also get enchantments off the top of your library with something like this. Next up, we got 10th District Hero, a 2/3 human for 1 and a white. This is kind of like a build it creature. 1 and a white, collect evidence 2, becomes a 4/4 with vigilance. 2 and a white, collect evidence 4. If it is that detective, which it becomes on the second one, becomes a legendary creature named Mileva, the Stalwart. It has base ratos 5/5, and it gives your other creatures indestructible. So it can kind of be like a build around creature where you're like, okay, I'm just getting this out as a 2/3, but over time, I can build this into an absolute monster that really helps the rest of my team. Moving on, Anzrag's Rampage. This one's going to be really interesting to see what kind of an impact it has in Commander, which is a format that has been kind of plagued with treasures in a way recently. Anzrag's Rampage, source for 5 mana. Draw artifacts you don't control, exile the top X cards, and then we're X the number of artifacts that were put there from the graveyard, the battlefield this turn. You may put a creature card, exile this way on the battlefield. It gains haste, turn in your hand at the beginning of next end step. So it's a very interesting card. One that's like, okay, it's a one-sided board wipe against artifacts. It doesn't really work against treasures. Like, it like eliminates the treasures still, but your opponents are just going to tap, sacrifice them away for mana, and just not utilize that mana because mana burns not anything. But basically, again, get rid of all those artifacts and then get something potentially massive off the top of your library. Moving on, Analyze the Pollen, $6.46, a very interesting rare. This costs cast a spell, you may collect evidence 8. Search life for a base land card, but if evidence was collected, instead go search for a creature or land. Not basic land there. Real, put in your hand. Basically a 1 mana early, hey, okay, let's get a land. Let's make sure I have mana fixing for my deck, and also ensure that I'm not missing any land drops, so we can go with that basic. Later on, maybe not even that much later, this becomes a 1 mana, yeah, go tutor for whatever land, again, you need, or again, whatever creature, which is huge. Next up, Crime Novelist, the first uncommon that we are seeing up here in this rarefied era of like $6. Already, this uncommon is going to have so much demand, of course, because, well, like I said, treasures are kind of obnoxious in Commander right now. A 1/3 Goblin Bard for 3 mana in total. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, put a counter on this and add red. Wizards, why did you make this? Yeah, they did not need any more treasure support. When we just have one that says, oh yeah, remember that like Goldspan Dragon that like lets your treasures like, you know, tap sacrifice for 2 mana? This is just, yeah, also that, basically. This one, again, whenever you're sacrificing any artifact, does not have to be a treasure, but if it is, you're getting 2 mana. You get an extra red mana. You are ritual affecting with that, which is just crazy. And again, if you're sacrificing a clue, again, pay 2, sacrifice a clue. Now you also get 1, and you also get a counter on this. So this will become a threat. It really didn't need those +1 counters on this at all to make this still a card that would be $6.26. If it didn't have that, it still would be that exact same price, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, this is a crazy good effect that is pushed, should not be uncommon. Wizards, what are you doing? Next up, Urgent Necropsy. Instant for 4 mana in Golgari. Additional cost to cast this spell, collect evidence 8x, I should say. We're actually the total mana value of the permanent spell targets. Show up to 1 target artifact, 1 target creature, 1 target enchantment, 1 target planeswalker. Yeah, it is a card that can remove a lot of things. It is dependent on having a graveyard, though, so this is an interesting mythic because, again, compared to others, they lowered price because this one, I believe, is just more for specific decks. Again, if you have a graveyard-centric deck, you can guarantee that you have a good amount of things in your graveyard. Yeah, you can get rid of basically whatever you need to get rid of. If not, you might be in a pinch. Moving on. Elicit Masquerade, a rare that can be very impactful in the right deck. Enchantment for 4 mana, flash, enters the battlefield, imposter counter on each creature you control. Whenever a creature controlled, imposter counter on it dies. Return to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Basically, this can be played in a couple different ways. Again, it is a flash enchantment, so you can flash it in response to someone casting a Wrath and say, okay, my creatures are gone, but I'm going to basically replace them with creatures out of my graveyard. Or again, in like an aristocrat style strategy where you're just like, okay, I got a bunch of tokens in play. Okay, play this, get counters on all my creature tokens, which are just useless little 1/1s, not useless, sorry creatures, but sacrifice them with my free sacrifice outlets, and then replace them with much better creatures out of my graveyard. So this can either, again, be a mass reanimation play, or like a wrath protection play, a very cool card. Moving on, Case of the Uneaten Feast, yet another card that, again, just has a good amount of value built in just to start. Enchantment case for a single white mana. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So again, it's just like a Johnny's Presence essentially. But once you solve it, gain a 5 or more life this turn. Again, if you have a life gain strategy, that's easy, very easy to do. Then it's solved, you can sacrifice it, and creature cards in your graveyard gain. You may cast this card for your graveyard until end of turn. So kind of, again, not like a reanimation, but like your graveyard is an extension of your hand for that turn, so you can recast creatures. Homicide Investigator is next to another rare, making an impact. A 2/2 human detective for 2 mana. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control die, investigate. Triggers only once each turn. Wizards being a bit of a fun stopper with this one, again, being like, nah, just one and non-token. So again, very specific on what this does. But again, for the right deck out there that's looking to sacrifice non-token creatures, you can get a good amount of clues throughout the game. Again, once each turn. You can still get that in your opponent's turns as well. Finally, Kylox's Volt Strider. Again, $5.97, still up there quite a bit. 4/4 vehicle for 3 mana and is it. Collect evidence 6, becomes an artifact creature till end of turn. Or you can crew too if you'd rather do that. So this has a couple different avenues to actually get this crewed. That being said, when it attacks, you may cast an instant or short spell from among the exiled cards. When a graveyard, put in the bottom of its owner's library instead. So basically, yeah, you can kind of cheat on spells with this, which can be quite powerful. So yeah, you can do some pretty crazy things with a card like this. But now as this episode is coming to a close, it's time for me to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts are on these cards. What card do you think is going to end up on top? What price is surprising you right now? And what prices do you think are a bit inflated and will go down by the time that, well, it's time to actually buy these cards? So yeah, let me know in the comments below. If you are interested in these cards, make sure you check out that card list link in the description below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.